So we weren't able to have the Emerge 2020 Chicago conference, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to be able to talk to some of the sponsors of that conference and get the lowdown on what they're doing in the market. So stay tuned because we're going to talk storage today. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Future Tech video podcast. I also want to let everyone know that the audio version of the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most of the other podcast platforms, or you can find it at futr.buzzsprout.com. In 2012, Isilon veterans Neal Fachan, Peter Godman, and Aaron Passey set out to create a new vision for storage. After extensive market research and development, they released the file-based storage platform Qumulo in 2014. Most recently, they finished a substantial funding round with a valuation over $1 billion. They have built a software-defined storage product that is built to run in the data center or in the cloud, focusing on performance, simplicity, and they are looking to rewrite the storage playbook. And I can tell you that they are popping up in deals all over the place. Today, we have with us Molly Presley, who runs global product marketing for Cumulo, to tell us the story of Cumulo and where they are headed. Welcome, Molly.
Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And as usual, we have Sundish Patel.
Hey, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being. Just being. Thank you for being.
You're the only one that's ever said that.
So Molly, tell us a little bit about the Cumulo value proposition. Because I don't know that a whole lot of people know. I mean, even though you guys are a $1 billion valuation company, I don't know that a whole lot of people, have heard the story of Cumulo yet, and where you fit into the market.
Yeah. So Cumulo, you mentioned, are great and very intelligent founders at the beginning of this. They did something kind of unique when they kicked off the company. Before they wrote a line of code, the guys came from the venture capital firms and said, we would like to fund something new. What is it you would build? And before they wrote a line of code or did an architecture or anything like that, a business plan, they talked to almost 1,000 customers about what are the challenges that they have with infrastructure, getting access to their data. And it was interesting outcomes. It was, I just kind of hate my storage vendor. I have to work with them, but every time I have to pick up the phone and call support or talk to my rep, my blood pressure goes up, and that's super frustrating to me. I know I'm going to have to be sold something new every time I talk to my rep, or when I call customer support, I'm going to have to go through escalations and pull up serial numbers and get passed on before I can get my question answered. Things like that were a huge pain point. And then there was also that, if you think about back in 2012, that's when the cloud was really getting going, when dispersed environments where not everyone was circled around a data center, but people were working in a lot of different locations around the globe. And so there's a lot of challenges with data on how do I take advantage of new technologies? My data is being created in multiple locations. There's now sensors everywhere, and I need to figure out, how do I capture my data? How do I access it, make it available to the creators, the users, the business? And so really the foundation of Cumulo is start with what are the big challenges and look at how do we architect a product to uniquely solve them.
So it's interesting. We always say that it's the customer is the key. Like nothing matters except what the customer says about the products, right? And I think it's really interesting that your first approach was to go and talk to 1,000 customers and figure out what their pain points were. And I also think it's interesting that so many of the pain points that came up were around sort of the service aspect of it. I mean, can you speak to what your thoughts were around that?
Yeah, I mean, technology differentiation is interesting, and sometimes vendors and thought leaders get a little bit too wrapped up in how neat their widget is. They designed this super cool thing and it's incrementally different from the competitor, and the marketing teams go make a big deal about it. And that's a little bit, for us marketing folk, it's the outside in kind of perspective is what you need to focus on. What does the customer care about? Not what do we care about and what are we proud of? And Cumulo was founded from the very beginning, not on how could we do something different than competitor X, Y, or alternative Z? But instead, are there challenges out there not being solved, and how do you start from there? And so that was really what it came down to, was creating a business plan and an architecture, of course, and a product that we sell that uniquely addresses the real challenges customers have. And the reason we've been so successful, even though our brand is not broadly well known like a lot of the major brands out there, is our customers just love us. Our NPS score is almost 90, which is
That's
unbelievably high.
Yeah.
And our Gartner Peer Insights, stuff like that, third-party reviews are really great. And it really comes down to they like working with us. We solve real business problems, real challenges that they have, and they get good value for what we're providing to them. So they're happy to write us a check. They enjoy the experience. And as they're being challenged to solve new business problems with their data, we help them get there. And they know we'll help them today. And we have an architecture that's going to help them into the future. It's a very future-proof type of architecture.
Storage is a really crowded space. I mean, it has, really entrenched legacy, vendors. There was a huge disruption that came around, adding Flash into the market, that really kind of upended the market, and you guys kind of come in on the heels of that. What was it that you thought you could bring to the storage market? I mean, what was it that you're like? I mean, besides obviously the customer service aspect of it and the customer satisfaction perspective of it, what was it? You're like, here's the thing that needs to change. What was sort of that light bulb moment for you guys?
Yeah, I think that the first piece of that answer is, yes, we're a storage company, but we're really a data company. We're about making data available to access after it's been created, to retain, to reference back to drive interesting insights from with analytics, and focusing more on that, the value of the software and how we enable those things than on the storage. So we're currently working through a rebranding process and moving from calling ourselves hybrid file storage to file data platform. So I know that sounds like marketing, and it is, but there's an important subtlety here that there's really no one else out there in the landscape that we can compare to that we say, legacy vendor X, Cumulo does this other thing, and here's how we're different. We're just thinking about the market differently. So our architecture is platform agnostic. If you want to use NVMe, if you want to use the native AWS infrastructure, if you want some, cheap and deep disk, whatever the storage platform is agnostic to us. So what that means is we are software defined. We have a software application that no matter where you're running it, natively in the cloud, in the data center, across multiple clouds, you get the same features, the same functionality, the same capabilities. And when you think about that versus the way it was done in the past with legacy vendors, there was hardware lock-in. At the end of 3 years, you had to figure out what were you going to do to upgrade your hardware, and were you going to commit to another 3 to 5 years. This really liberates a customer both from proprietary hardware, making a decision on hardware that maybe they'll want to change a year from now because they want to go to the cloud, whatever it might be. But it also helps them to ride the commodity curve. So when a faster new processor comes out, when NVMe becomes cost effective versus SSD, they actually can make that shift and take advantage of those new capabilities. And as costs come down, they can take advantage of those faster. So while we do think of ourselves as a storage company, we've kind of unlocked our software from the hardware or from the platforms so that customers can use what they want to accomplish their performance or cost goals. And if they want to move their data around, we'll help them do that. There's no lock in there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a challenging problem to solve, though, that, you have a great advantage being a software-based company, right? Because you can be so agile. You can add new features and change and pivot, to meet market demands very quickly. But you do then have to make sure it runs on all these crazy platforms, which has got to be a lot of work, I imagine.
It is. I mean, our engineering team, we do qualify platforms. It's not anything anyone wants to bring to us, but it's a reasonable cross-section or sampling of everything. And, what it really requires is designing your software differently. So when you want to do an upgrade, if you have your software running in a whole bunch of different locations, how do you get the code to those environments and do that upgrade? Versus in the past where you had this big monolithic system, you get the code on there with a USB or an internet connection, however you got the code there, and you upgrade the whole system. Now we need to disperse code and upgrade on different platforms that have different device drivers. And so, just basic things like that are hard. And while it seems like on the surface, Cumulo has some of the same features and functionality that a legacy alternative has, we do, but we had to architect them completely different so that you could use them as software in a distributed environment. So taking those hard enterprise requirements of security, data protection, uptime, and being able to make it where you can have that be done in software and across the environments is really the hard work that our engineers have done.
You guys made kind of an interesting choice too with using erasure coding on your back end. We like erasure coding because it gives you an opportunity to really massively scale your storage system, right? In ways that you cannot do with RAID systems. I think that's an interesting choice. And I think when you talk about distributed systems, it's a really, ideal sort of platform for that. I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up an interesting topic that when we went back in 2012 and we were looking what should we build, you may remember that object stores were really in vogue back then. And our investors even said, are you sure? Really? A file system? You sure you want to go build an object store? And so there was a decision point we had to make there on file versus object. And when it came down to it, we made the decision we did that most legacy applications, the applications write to file. That's where it's performant. And there's some problems with file, scalability being an issue, for example, that object storage was solving. So object storage had this different functionality. It was using erasure coding. It was highly distributed. Maybe it had file systems inside, and that's going probably too technical, but maybe they had 40 file systems in their object store, but it didn't matter because to the customer, they were getting scalability. And erasure coding is a big part of that. It gives you the ability to distribute your data over a whole bunch of devices. It gives you the ability to not worry about failures. If you have a bunch of disk drives fail that you're rebuilding, it abstracts all those problems from the user environment. So what Cumulo built was a best of both worlds. It was a file system that can scale to billions and billions of files and can scale to millions of IOPS and dozens of gigabytes of throughput, and has erasure coding underneath it so that as you have lots and lots of disk drives or SSDs in there, it's fault tolerant. So we built kind of a lot of the cool technology of erasure coding and object storage inside, but with the performance and function that you get with a file system.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is that the benefits of object storage haven't really been in object storage devices so much as in products that utilize object storage to to run. Yeah,
I mean, anytime you try to get into object storage, and I'm interested in what it does, particularly in the cloud. When you think about Amazon S3. But there's a whole path here where applications have to be written to use object storage. A whole bunch of them have been written in the cloud. There's a lot less in the data center. So it's kind of like we were talking about on one of the cool things about being software is you don't really have to worry too much about what the infrastructure is underneath. Present the right interfaces to the applications and users, and then they don't really want to get too involved in how do we handle the bits flowing through our system and protect them. They kind of just assume you're doing that. Cumulo takes care of that great, provides the right applications. So the whole conversation comes back to users. What are you going to do with it? What are your data requirements? What are your application requirements? And that's the cool thing about file systems is they can support both. You can absolutely put a nice S3 interface in front of it. You can move data to objects. So, it's kind of, I think, there was a time there where we were trying to figure out how to accomplish scale, and we were trying to accomplish distributed environments. And the approach Cumulo took, was really kind of looking at what is the more difficult view of writing a file system from the ground up. We took a long time to write it, and we're 8 years in, and just now really starting to scale the business. It took a while, but it's good technology that people really depend on.
Yeah. So. You guys decided to build a file file-based system, right? Rather than sort of a block storage system.
Right.
And that's sort of the future of those two approaches is sort of a hotly debated topic in some categories. Some people think that everything is going to end up in some sort of file-based storage system at the end of the day, and some people think, "Wow, block's never going to go away." Obviously, you guys have made a bet on that, and as you talk about being a data company and dealing with unstructured data and things like that, you're certainly placing your chips in that category. Do you want to talk? Because file's kind of hard to do, right? There's a lot of complexities to file. It's a lot easier to do block.
All the smart file system guys say it takes 8 to 10 years to build a file system that's robust. I think that's the rule of thumb. It is hard to do, but to your point, we have some kind of fundamentals that we use at Qumulo, is giving customers freedom, flexibility, and choice. Freedom, flexibility, choice, and kind of the ability to control their destiny. And when you think about file versus block and the choices that we've made, when you think about structured and semi-structured data, block's great there, VMware, environments, all those types of things. But when you start to think about unstructured data, block storage just doesn't fit there. So really for us, it was a decision on which type of data do we want to serve. And again, you go back to 2012 and there's all those exponential curves that we've all seen a million times about the growth of unstructured data. Yeah. And the challenge was storing it initially, just where do I put it all? And I don't have a lot of budget, and how do I know what I have? But now that's really been solved. There's lots of places to put that quickly growing data. Now it's all about how do I give access to applications and users in the business to make intelligent decisions around it. And so when you come back to what decisions we made, we went with, we want to solve the unstructured data problem, and we want to solve it for the application users. We don't just want to store it. There's lots of ways to do that, but we want to make it accessible and usable and performant and give customers the ability to decide where they want to run it. If you have a CIO who has a cloud first mandate, that's fine. If you have an application that, still runs on legacy, and the guy who wrote that application from the oil and gas industry retired 20 years ago, we can still serve that data, the applications. And that's really what we're looking to do.
One of the things you said, Molly, that really caught my attention now after selling storage for 22 years, you made the comment around your data said that some customers were really frustrated in working with their sales rep and a sales vendor, right? A storage vendor, right?
Didn't you say you were a sales rep?
Yeah, exactly. So I was a little offended, but that's fine. No, but it's a great point, because I think what you're saying is, and I really appreciate this, and I hope you can speak a little bit about the customer experience, right? Chris alluded to how we always look at companies that really put that customer experience at the top of the priority list, because nothing really matters unless you have happy customers, right? And so can you speak a little bit about why is your NPS score so high, and what are you doing different to give that customer experience?
Yeah, there's a few kind of fundamental things that we did there. The first was we use Slack for customer support. So when a customer works with us, they don't have a support ticket. Every customer, they buy us with a software subscription license, and support is included in that. They get a dedicated Slack channel that for the customers I spend time with, I can see what's going on with them, their sales guy, their SE, product management. So it's flat, it's real time, and it's just like communicating with the rest of your team. Hey man, I just got here and I can't figure out what this log file means. What does that mean? Oh, send it over. Let me look at it. It's a very real time conversational thing. The Slack channels on our end are all managed by system administrators, so we don't have tiering. Everybody who is on the other end of Slack knows how to manage our systems, knows how to look at our analytics and that type of thing. So that's the second piece is real-time access, but then you're working with experts on the other end. There's not, that tiering, which can be super frustrating. And then there's just a fanatical focus on the voice of the customer, constant surveys of our users on what would they like to see from us, what are they satisfied with, what are they not. But we also have really smart software that is cloud-based monitoring, where we can see our entire fleet of customers, and we can look at, for all the clusters and systems deployed, which features are being used most, which are being turned on but not really used. And then that gives us a lot of insight from our data science team to look at, why is this feature not being adopted, or why was it turned on but there's no data flowing through it? And usually that gives us some really interesting insights into is not working properly, or it's not really value add, or customers maybe don't know about it. And so we do a lot of data science work on understanding what's really happening versus it being a marketing function where we launch a product, we're very proud of it, and journalists write about it, but then customers never really use it. We delve into why.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that because, again, being that sales guy, I do appreciate what you're saying, selling storage for as long as I have. I think the customer experience needs to continuously get better. It needs to get easier. We need to solve that experience for the customer. But kind of ducktailing on that, also, like Chris was alluding, a lot of storage vendors out there, and I truly believe, and I think Chris agrees too, is culture is a big part of a startup, and it's a big part of how you build a company. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of a thing, right? It's a very difficult problem to solve. So how is Qumulo different from a culture perspective? Because I really respect some of the leadership you guys have. I know Mike Odisho here in Chicago. He's a great guy. He's been in the industry for a long time. Like, how do you, if you're getting somebody over to come to Qumulo, what's that culture sell?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I've been in this space for a long time as well, and I can't tell you the number of times at different companies I've worked for, we've had the discussion of, oh my God, we have this new platform coming out that is going to dramatically change the economics of the business. And the company went, oh no, that means our average sales going from $100,000 to $50,000 because of this innovation. And it was like, gosh, how do we hang on to that $100,000 sale? And it's very, very unique that Qumulo sits there, and literally this just happened this week. We were doing a review of a launch that we have coming up, and there were some people saying, how do we make sure we maintain the deals that are already quoted? And our CEO said, guys, doesn't matter. Our job is to bring the best value to our customers, and that's what makes them come back over and over again, and that's why our business does well. So don't worry about the fact that, yes, the quotes are going to go down, and yes, revenue will go down. Let's just focus on giving the customers what they want. That's just a sample of how we think about things, but it permeates through the whole company of make sure the customers are getting what they need. They'll be happy. They'll come back and put more data in us, and we'll ultimately both be successful. Another example of that was just recently we launched a technology called Shift, which is taking file data and making a copy of it into Amazon S3. So shifting it from file to object format. And once that happens, it's out of the Qumulo namespace. We no longer have control of the data, and we're not charging for the data in S3. So, you would think, well, why would the CFO let us do that? Let's take a petabyte of data out of our file system and put it in S3 and not charge for it. Seems kind of counterintuitive, but that's what customers want. We spend a lot of time asking them how they want to use S3 and what are your frustrations. And their frustrations are, great, I have to have proprietary applications and software laying on top of S3 that adds cost, adds complexity, so that whole value I wanted is kind of gone. We took that abstraction layer away, knowing that, well, when they need to use that data for performance or in their data center, it will come back through Qumulo, and they'll like us, and they'll choose to bring it back through us versus someone else. So there's a lot of pieces culturally we do like that.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about where have you had success in sort of key use cases? Like what sort of market verticals have you really been strong in?
Yeah, we really group them into 3 types of data. There's video data, which might be corporate video production, media and entertainment, Hollywood production, TV shows, that type of video, or video surveillance data. So there's video data as category number 1. Then on the other side is analytical data, AI, machine learning, where you're really running just really high performance workloads using things like Splunk, for example. And then right in the middle is enterprise file. It's IT data centers that need security and user directories and home directories, whether it's for enterprise or for university types of environments. That is traditional file data that like the idea of moving off of some of the legacy incumbents to Qumulo because it will help them get to the cloud and things like that. But kind of 3 areas.
We live in sort of really challenging, market conditions right now. And, it's impressive that you guys just, closed a fairly substantial round in the middle of all of this, right? What like based on the challenges of this market and trying to and some of the industries you talked about have been hit pretty hard, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us about what you guys are doing to adapt and change within this crazy world we're living in right now.
Yeah, the fundraising timing was, I guess you could say, opportunistic. We didn't actually need money. We had quite a bit of money in the bank, and investors were coming and wanting to invest. And the finance folks at the company took a look and decided, it was a sensible thing to do. I mean, honestly, maybe there won't be money available next year. You never know. And so the smart people who manage the company decide, hey, well, there's money here and it's a good deal. And, they made that decision. But what's cool is it is helping us scale even faster, taking that extra money to scale and go to market and grow so that our brand is a little bit more well-known in the future will really help us. But there's other things that we're doing to adapt to this landscape. Figuring out how customers, and I mean, I know this is why you're doing this podcast series, that figuring out how do customers want to engage, how do users want to talk to us? And what we're finding is workshops are super popular, that sitting on another webinar is not super interesting, but
Zoom fatigue.
But a workshop where you can facilitate a whiteboard session and 4 or 5 peers, from different companies all in the same call talking about how did they move their media and entertainment studio to the cloud, for example? How are they getting low latency to their creators? Or how did they shift analytics environment up to the cloud to facilitate remote workers? And doing workshops like that seem to be super popular and helping customers feel like we're inventing and how to talk to them and how to interact with them. And so there's been a lot of just trying different things, understanding from our customers how they would like to talk to us. Do they still want executive briefings that they used to get at trade shows? Turns out they don't, interestingly enough. But not trying to force it, just realizing our times have changed and we need to evolve and understand how people want to talk to us and have a real conversation.
Well, you're definitely in an interesting role these days because, global product marketing is, been a really challenging environment because all the trade shows have gone, all the usual channels have gone away. But I think in some regards, I think we're kind of refining, what that message is in this space. Because I think we're finding that a lot of the things that we used to do are not bringing a tremendous amount of value to people. And you mentioned like all the workshops and things like that are actually really bringing value. So it's interesting, to figure out what works.
Well, and the other thing that it's offering, which I think is really cool, is if you just think about a trade show in the past or a channel partner event, you were maybe targeting an enterprise that had 10,000 employees and you'd only get to talk to 1 or 2 of them. They were the ones who had the travel budget or had the invitation, whatever it was. And now you can open that up to so many more people. So one of the cool things I'm finding is when we talk to an organization, for a company to be happy with a technology decision, you want to bring a lot of people on. There's procurement, there's the folks who are going to use it, there's the managers. And now we actually can bring along more of the team on the decision and what we're doing and why. And that's been a really positive outcome.
Yeah.
Instead of decisions being forced on them,
Yeah. Well, and a huge cost savings, I got to imagine too. Right.
Yeah. Trade shows
and I think this is the new normal.
For everybody.
Yeah, for everybody involved. I mean, I think a lot of people are missing the trips, myself included. But I think, like the amount of money you're saving and the things you can do, instead of that are kind of, nice.
And I think they'll stick. I don't think we're going to go back as soon as there's a vaccine. It's not going to be. We are on a new path, whatever that is.
No, but I'm old enough to remember the old days of the web and the promise of the web and that this is how business is going to be done now. We don't have to travel to anything anymore, and it's all going to be done. And that was never realized. But I think as things have gotten, the technology's gotten better, and our ability to utilize the platforms have gotten better. We've slowly been moving in that direction. And I think now we've sort of really hyper accelerated that, and it's interesting to see the new ways that people are getting the message out.
Yeah, lots of new tools.
Yeah.
As much as I see a lot of that, man, and I also feel like what Bipple was saying during our last conversation with Bipple, he was saying, having those creative moments with other people, like having a conversation like we're having now.
Yeah.
Like actually, getting into a discussion, having different perspectives and listening, that creative aspect, I don't want to lose that.
Well, I think he was, he in particular, he was talking about sort of the opportunistic meetings of, that foster a lot of creativity.
That's right.
And that's a kind of a cultural thing too. I mean, I think, and I think that, because his take on that was that we're getting this bump in productivity because everybody's working from home. They're working more hours because they don't have to commute and all those things, and they have flexibility to do that. But he said that I think there's going to be a tapering off of that because at some point that sort of opportunistic meeting and creativity that comes from that is gone. So you're going to have a decline of productivity because the creativity is missing from the equation. So it's sort of our job to figure out how to reinsert a lot of that creativity into the discussion, I think.
Yeah, but Chris, when we used to go to all those conferences, what was the thing that you would say all the time? Which is, once you get to a conference and you're physically in front of someone and just, haphazardly you get to meet some people, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a conversation, right? And Chris does this really, really well. But it's fun because you're not really planning the conversation. It just organically happens. And the next thing you know, you have a couple customers weighing in, you have some vendors weighing in. And the purpose is really to share ideas and thoughts, not to see who's smarter and who's right, but it's really to have an intellectual conversation. And that's the part which I think you're going to miss a lot, Chris, because I know you love those conferences.
Well, I get to do this.
Because he goes to every single booth, right, and talks to every single person, right? Like I
love cool ideas. I love cool ideas. But hey man, call VC. I think there's a product idea there, right? To sort of switch gears here a little bit. I want to ask you a little bit about like what we talked about, sort of the file versus block kind of discussion. But what do you see as the future of storage? I mean, there's so much going on in that space. I mean, where do you think it's all leading?
Yeah, I think really when it comes down to it, there will always be innovation in infrastructure, faster hardware, faster memory, cost reductions, and that's going to continue. I mean, we all worried about Moore's Law, and we found our ways to deal with that. And so innovation will continue. And so when you think about where we're going and where I think the industry is going, it's a lot more about offering the services, the interfaces, the capabilities that a customer needs, that if you want to easily run up a analytics service or a machine learning service, or you want to flexibly and dynamically have elasticity to your environment where you want to spin up more performance or more capacity, just a lot more flexibility is what I think customers are going to be looking for, not buying a monolithic thing for $1 million that has a certain amount of capacity and performance, but instead dynamic services where developers, where data scientists, data users, and traditional enterprise can all kind of self-serve what they need when they need it, is really where I think things are going. And that's not just in the cloud. I think that's in data centers as well.
Yeah, we're seeing a big movement towards everything as a service these days.
Everything,
absolutely.
And I think that the writing is on the wall for that one, especially now when cash flow is a real big issue for so many organizations.
Well, and it's really frustrating too, as a IT buyer, I've heard this so many times, to know I only get budget approved once every 5 years for an infrastructure purchase. And at the beginning of that, I've overspent and I'm not using most of it. And then I have to try to predict what I'm going to need at the end. And what if I underpredict? And then, oh gosh, I can't give the service I need to the business. That's very frustrating. It puts people in a really tough, kind of rock and a hard spot sort of situation. And this flexibility and as a service takes all of that out of it, so they can say, I have money, but I'm going to spend it when I need it on what I know instead of guessing. Yeah. I mean, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, it completely does. And I think, a lot of financial people in organizations have been sort of scrambling to figure that out, right? Because, I mean, one, you shift all this spend from capital to OpEx. That has significant implications, but it frees up a lot of cash.
Taxes is typically, it is. It's a hard job for the CFO.
Yeah, and not only but it does free up some of your cash flow, but there's a lot of complicated factors in there, because it's when you have these sort of OpEx based models, they can be variable in their nature, right? And so that's not something that's easily budgeted for sometimes. And but the flip side of that is, surprises always happen. Somebody, you buy a new company and you've got to, add capacity, right? And that comes in the middle of the year and it's unexpected, and you have to adjust for that. So
yeah, I mean, Qumulo does a cool thing there, and I agree with everything you're saying. And we're still on a path to getting this where it's just the way it needs to be for everyone involved. But Qumulo does a neat thing. We have predictive analytics that you can go into our dashboard, and it will tell you how fast is your data growing, and when are you likely to need more capacity, and which users are running into performance bottlenecks, and predicting when you should add performance, when will you run out of metadata. We have some pretty cool analytics we built in to kind of help with that. But in the end, you don't know when you might buy that new company or a new work group might come over. So you need the business model as well as the technology.
Well, and I think the interesting thing about the way you guys are approaching the market is you have a lot of flexibility in growing that footprint. I mean, if you need to, because you're a software-based company, if you need to grow fast, you don't have to worry about, restricted supplies because of, tariffs or pandemic and things like that. You can look to alternate vendors, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me, we kind of talked about what the future of storage is. What's next for Cumulo? Like, what are the great ideas that you guys have on tap? I know you probably can't share a whole lot of that, but
I'm grinning, I don't want to be the one who has to have the wrong words edited out.
Yes. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a flavor of, the direction that you're looking.
Definitely. Yeah. So the whole concept of as a service platforms is directionally where we're heading for sure.
Yeah.
Multi-cloud flexibility. We're in GCP and AWS today, but, expanding that to other clouds, not just in the Americas, but around the globe. And it's not just about having our technology running on the infrastructure and in the marketplace, but integration with cloud monitoring tools and their sales teams and how customers are accustomed to buying without losing the legacy buyer who has data centers. So, a lot of where we're heading is business models and access to the technologies where customers want to buy. And then the data management piece of how do you see all your data? How do you move it around? How do you know who's accessed which data in different locations? And continuing to really invest in that data visibility and data management piece is another big area that we're focusing on.
That's awesome. And like I said, we see you guys popping up in deals all over the place. So you guys are really making a lot of headway. I mean, obviously you're, have a valuation over $1 billion now. So that's probably says something's going on there, right? Yeah. So I think it's really exciting. Molly, really appreciate your insight into the storage market and telling us all about Cumulo. I think you're going to be a really, really exciting company to watch going forward. And I really appreciate you coming on and telling us the story. Thanks so much.
Really fun conversation. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Good luck, Molly.
So if you like what you saw, please hit that like button, click on that subscribe button, because that helps a ton. And if you want to get notifications when we post more content, click on that bell icon, and I'll see you in the next video.